Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to explain why pipeline welders do not need certifications. Technically, we do need certifications, but generally speaking, you cannot get these certifications until you get the pipeline job, I guess. That's the only way you can obtain these certifications. So that's why I titled this video the way I did, because I believe a lot of you are asking because you're in school or you're wanting to be a pipeline welder. You're like, how can I get ahead? How can I be prepared? I need to get some certifications, right? Getting certifications are great. It's a great experience. Definitely get all the certifications you can, because at the end of the day, that's experience. But in this video, I wanted to explain more or less how being a pipeline welder works. Just to give you an idea of the nature of being a pipeline welder, within the 8 years that I traveled America welding on pipelines, I worked in 7 or 8 different states, and I worked for 20 to 22 different oil and gas companies. That right there is just an example of the nature of how it works. That should help you understand what I'm fixing to explain. So as a pipeline welder, I work for a contractor. A contractor is a construction company. The same way Ross Welding is a construction company. A small one, small little old contractor, but nonetheless, Ross Welding is a construction company and or contractor. So the pipeline welder works for a contractor. There's millions of contractors in America, in the world. The contractor has customers, which is the gas company and or oil company. Could be a water company also, because there's water pipes under the ground transferring water and they need welders to weld these pipes up also. But to keep it simple, we'll just stick to gas company. So you got pipeline welder, works for contractor. Contractor does work for gas company. The gas company wants and needs pipelines built. The same way Ross Welding customers need and want pipe fences built. Make sense? Let me know in the comments if you're following so far. I'm serious. I'm genuinely curious if you're understanding me so far. Moving right along. So like I said, there's tons of contractors and there's tons of gas companies. Each one of these gas companies have their own weld test. Some of them might be the exact same as other gas companies, but that doesn't matter to them. Whenever I, as a pipeline welder, get hired by the contractor, the gas company requires all the contractor's welders to take their own weld test for that specific project that they're building, for that pipeline that they're building. But to even obtain or get to take these tests and get these certifications for these gas companies, for this gas company, I have to first have the opportunity to get hired by the contractor, or even down further than that, get hired by that weld boss that's working for that contractor, to then have the opportunity to take the test for the gas company to get that certification. Slang term for certification on pipeline is papers. Generally speaking, papers or certifications are good for 6 months or a year, depending on the gas company. So to give you an example of being a pipeline welder and having to retest on different jobs that you go on, again, generally speaking, from my experience, pipeline jobs that I went on lasted anywhere from a month or less to 6 months on average. So 2 or 3 months on average, a project lasts. That's not to say you couldn't be on a project for a year or work for the same contractor for a year or 2 years, but that contractor will pick up work from this gas company, this gas company. That contractor's got several different customers, same way Ross Welding has several different customers. But as a traveling pipeline welder, it is very common to travel to Colorado and work for 2 months, get laid off, have to either go home or find another job in the same town, in the same state, or you may have to travel to Ohio next to get your next project. Therefore, you're working for a different contractor, sometimes, most generally, in my experience, and a different gas company. So therefore, you gotta retest all over again for that new gas company, new to you, and get their papers to weld on their pipe. It is possible to up your papers or re-qualify your papers without retesting. I done this, I believe, just one time whenever I was pipeline welding, and it was either because I was on a job for longer than 6 months, so I had to up my papers, or it was because I walked onto a job with papers. I'll explain that here in a minute. But either way, 6 months had come around and it was time to up my papers, and all it come down to was a matter of paperwork. In my situation, all they did was x-rayed one weld that I made on the job. X-ray checked out, everything looked good. The inspector for the gas company more or less wrote down in their paperwork that I was still making good welds on that job. And so they wrote it off as my papers were good for another 6 months. Just to be clear, in the 8 years that I pipeline welded and all the jobs that I welded on, all but one job that I worked on, they x-rayed 100% of the welds that all the welders made. That's why I said that it literally came down to just paperwork, because whether I was re-upping on that particular weld or not, they would have x-rayed that weld just like they did all the ones before that weld, and just like they did all the welds after that weld. The only way something would have changed is if I would have busted x-ray. So tip of the day, if you're re-upping papers on a job, try not to do it on a hard tie-in. There's also a whole nother subject that we can talk about in a later video pertaining to 3 strikes you're out or 5 strikes you're out, because that's a common rule on pipeline also, is if you bust x-ray 3 times within a certain amount of days or within the whole job, it just depends on what job it is, you lose your job. But anyway, moving on, but ultimately, I hope you're picking up the fact that it's all about quality control. The gas companies want quality welds on their pipelines. Like I said, that's just one example that I experienced. I'm sure it's possible that some gas companies require you to literally take their test again at 6 months to re-up your papers or certifications. Now, let me explain walking on a job with papers. Again, from my experience, the one time I was able to do this was in Ohio. I believe I was working for Mark West. I went to Ohio for one contractor, tested for Mark West, got their papers, worked for 1 month, got laid off, knew about another contractor in the area doing work for Mark West, same gas company, and they allowed me to walk onto their job. So I was able to move from this contractor to this contractor without having to retest because I had a certification for that gas company. That's just one example of an experience that I had. That was pretty cool, a really good feeling of being able to walk on, but that's the only time I ever got to do that in the 8 years I pipelined. I've heard of guys doing it quite a bit, especially if you're working in one area, like if you're working in Oklahoma a lot, or maybe Texas a lot, maybe you don't venture out of a certain state very often and you're doing the same work for the same gas companies, it's a little more common. But as a traveling pipeline welder, going here, there, and everywhere like I didn't get to do that very often. And I've heard of situations where the gas company may be building a project in Texas, for example, and they'll also be building a project in North Dakota. And just because you have papers for One Oak, we'll use One Oak, that's another gas company. Just because you have papers for One Oak in Texas doesn't mean those papers will work in a project in North Dakota. So regions matter also. I hope most of this made sense. I hope it helps you understand how being a pipeline welder works. I hope now you know why you don't technically need certifications before you become a pipeline welder. We need certifications, but you can't necessarily get them before you get the job. With that being said, I'm sure some of you may be asking, okay, how in the world do I prep for being a pipeline welder? I will answer that question in another video. If you're watching this video when it's published, it's not in the description yet, but if you're watching this video a week, 2 weeks, month or two later, check in the description of this video. There will be a link to that video explaining what you can do to prepare to become a pipeline welder. Thanks for watching. For more helpful resources, check out our website, aroswelding.com. Also check out our trade school, aroswelding.school. You can find some online courses over there. If you want to get notified whenever our courses open for enrollment or we add courses to the Aros Welding School, you can text the word trade school to 405-643-7176 and we will notify you whenever one of those two things happen. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome weekend. And remember, learn something every day.